Now, this is just a theory, and it's my own personal theory, but I'm under the impression that the social media backlash and the polls that keep going in the favor for the Conservatives against Justin Trudeau, I think all of this rhetoric, everything that's happening, the Nazi incident, I mean, all of the hatred that is directed at Trudeau domestically, but also internationally, I think it's taking a toll on him, which is why you saw that very bizarre and inexplainable act by the new House Speaker. Like, mind you, a new House Speaker yesterday where he tried to filibuster for 25 minutes, but there was nothing to filibuster for. It was just to waste time and to literally demand everybody's attention. There was no deadline. They didn't have a set amount of time for question periods. So it's very bizarre. I think all this is getting to Justin Trudeau, which is why he probably, I mean, this is my theory, that he forced or told the speaker to do that, to lay down the law, because the entire, if you listen to it, the entire rhetoric of what that House Speaker was saying was everything that the Conservatives or everything that a certain party or certain individuals are doing by garnering clicks and putting out this hatred message and bullying is not acceptable. And obviously that's directed towards the Conservatives and Pierre because they're just obliterating Justin Trudeau. 99% likelihood that the Conservatives are going to win. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Today, we're going to be taking a look at question period highlights. And the reason why I'm doubling down on this theory that Justin Trudeau is, well, it's getting to him. The pressure is getting to him. The rhetoric is getting to him because he keeps not showing up in the House of Commons. He's already jumped the gun and made accusations of who dropped the bomb on the hospital the day before there was actually an investigation conducted, and other politicians followed suit. None from the Conservative. It seems like all of the Liberal or NDP politicians followed suit. And there's an investigation that is still kind of inconclusive, but is debunking what Trudeau said. And so there's just so many reasons for Justin Trudeau not to show up in the House of Commons, not show up during the question period, and to just hide. So we're going to take a look at Pierre, who's not hiding, who's doing his job, and who completely obliterates the entire Liberal cabinet without even breaking a sweat. So sit back, relax, smash that like button, and enjoy the show. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Questions orales, l'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Prime Minister, he's not worth the cost of housing, which doubled since he took power. The middle class in Ontario, a couple sold their house to buy a castle in France, a 6,000-foot castle on 37 acres. They said they couldn't sell that castle to buy a house in Ontario. Why is it more expensive to be a member of the middle class in Canada than an aristocrat in France?
L'honorable ministre.
The Honourable Minister. I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his question. There's one thing the Leader of the Opposition can do. Just one to help Canadians. It's to vote for our Affordability Act. We want to reform competitiveness, but we want to get rid of GST for building new housing. For once, finally, will the opposition vote for Canadians? Yes or no? The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. After 8 years, this Prime Minister isn't worth the cost, and another law isn't going to change that. Yesterday, Conservatives raised a question with the Minister of the Environment. We asked if, yes or no, the department had warned this government that its so-called regulations on fossil fuels was going to disproportionately increase costs for people with lower incomes. And the answer is yes. The Bloc wants to increase this regulatory tax. Will this government finally overturn this tax so that Canadians can buy food and housing? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to remind the opposition leader that in their campaign platform for 2021, they proposed setting up standards for clean energy. The difference between us and them is that they just talk about it, whereas we're acting on it. Thanks to the standards in place, thousands, or rather millions, are being invested all over the country to help Canadians reduce their carbon footprint when they use their cars. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
We know that after 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost of housing, which has doubled since he took office. It's gotten so crazy that the cost of a house in Ontario means that one couple sold their 2,000 square foot home in that province and was able to buy a 6,000 square foot castle on 37 acres of land in France. They now say they could never sell the castle and afford to move back to Canada. Why does it cost more to be a member of the middle class in Canada than to be an aristocrat in France?
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons from the Conservatives, and Canadians will take no lessons from the Conservative, Mr. Speaker. There is one thing, Mr. Speaker, not many I agree, but there's one thing that the Leader of the Opposition can do for Canadians watching at home, Mr. Speaker, is to vote for the affordability bill, Mr. Speaker, that will empower more competition in this country, that will reduce GST in new housing, Mr. Speaker. Well, once for all, will they vote for Canadian? Yes or no?
Mark. L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
None of the bills are affordable after 8 years of this government. I asked, why is it that you can buy a castle in France for a lower cost than a middle-class home in Ontario? And his response was basically, let them eat cake, Mr. Speaker. The fact is, people can't even afford bread after 8 years of inflationary policies. Will they reverse their inflationary deficits and reverse their tax hikes so Canadians can eat, heat, and house themselves?
Folks, been doing this for years. Never had this many issues on Parlez-vous.
L'honorable ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, the Leader of the Opposition refuses to explain to Canadians why he won't support legislation that is going to make housing more affordable, that's going to build more rental units for Canadians, that's going to make groceries more affordable. Mr. Speaker, it has been clear that for the past 8 years that they've been in opposition, they haven't done anything to support Canadians. What we do know is that they've constantly voted against measures that support Canadians, like childcare, like the Canada Child Benefit, and like this legislation that they have an opportunity to do the right thing and to vote for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
She looks like she's ready for Oktoberfest.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
They've been promising for 8 years that their bills would lower the cost, but since that time, housing costs have doubled. They promised their carbon tax would make people better off. Then they brought in a second carbon tax. And we asked the government's own officials at committee yesterday if their analysis showed that the cost would rise for energy and that these costs would be borne disproportionately by the poor and middle class, and that government official confirmed that yes. Why is this government taxing the people who can least afford it? Will they admit that after 8 years they're simply not worth the cost?
Yeah. W's in the chat for Pierre. That's for sure.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to a study that came out 2 days ago, in Canada, 60% of small and medium-sized business across the country have been affected by extreme weather event this year alone. 44% of them say that it has a direct hit on their revenue. What's the response from the Conservative Party? Let's make pollution free again. Let's have more climate change. Let's have more air pollution and water pollution. I think Canadians can take any of the proposition that the Conservative Party of Canada has for them, Mr. Speaker.
Bravo.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. This is day 13 of the war between Israel and Hamas. Humanitarian needs are more acute than ever. The United States pledged $100 million in humanitarian aid. Canada pledged too little. But even more important than money,
Canada pledged too little.
the civilians who desperately need it. As we speak, Only 20 trucks have permission to enter Gaza. According to the United Nations, at least 100 are needed per day. We're far from that goal. Has the Prime Minister spoken to Israel and Egypt to ask for better access to provide humanitarian aid? The Honourable Minister of Global Affairs. In fact, the Prime Minister spoke with the Israeli President and the Egyptian President. We have constantly asked for access to provide humanitarian aid to Gaza. Gaza is one of the most difficult places to live right now on the planet. It's important to get aid into Gaza. We're going to continue to engage with different countries in the region for that to get done. There's one thing that Canada can do on the world stage, and that's show humanitarian leadership. I know it's a lot to ask of Egypt in terms of opening its border to Hamas-occupied territory. I know it's a lot to ask of Israel when Hamas...
No one wants the refugees.
...hostages. But humanity can only come from them. It can't come from the monsters behind Hamas. Humanitarian aid has to reach civilians. What's the Prime Minister doing to make sure that it gets done quickly?
Bro, I swear to God, if Canada opens up a policy to bring people in from Gaza...
The current humanitarian situation is deeply concerning for our government.
You're going to have a lot of backlash.
Victims of this tragedy. Canada's commitment to provide humanitarian aid remains unshakable. Getting aid to civilians is essential. We implore all parties to protect civilians and to, in all circumstances, maintain their commitments towards upholding international humanitarian law.
Toronto's housing crisis is out of control, worsened by the loss of thousands of affordable homes by
grocery store CEOs.
Liberal governments.
Add it to your bingo card.
Seekers were left homeless this summer while the City of Toronto had to carry the weight of housing them. This federal government promised $97 million in assistance, but Toronto hasn't received it yet. Why are all the Toronto Liberal MPs so ineffective and unable to convince their own Prime Minister to deliver Toronto the help they need?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I've had the opportunity to speak to Mayor Chow to address the interim needs, obviously, with winter coming, to make sure people have a roof over their heads. It's work we need to do with the Ontario government, with the City of Toronto, with the GTA generally, because we know that asylum seekers are being spread out into all those areas, and they need to have a roof over their head for winter. But clearly what we need to see from the City of Toronto is the actual receipts. We've asked Mayor Chow for the receipts. We're glad to pay for those receipts once we receive them. Thank you.
After 8 long years of this Liberal NDP government doubling the national debt, doubling mortgage and rental costs, Canadians could also see a 40% increase in their monthly mortgage costs. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. 85% of variable rate mortgage holders believe they are worse off. Liberal inflation, fueled by Liberal deficits, made the most rapid interest rate hikes ever. And now Canada's most at risk in the G7 for a mortgage default crisis.
Yeah.
Prime Minister, rein his inflationary spending in so interest rates can come down and Canadians can keep a roof over their heads.
This financial crisis that's about to happen in the next 18 months is just scary.
As you know, Mr. Speaker, Canada has the lowest deficit among all G7 countries. Canada has been reaffirmed as AAA credit rating.
Bingo, bingo!
Our fiscal frame is...
Bingo!
But, Mr. Speaker, we continue to support Canadians, and the Conservatives continue to call for cuts. You see, Canadian families are relying on the supports that we provide, are relying on the Canada Child Benefit, are relying on their pensions, Mr. Speaker, and the Conservatives' plan is to cut all of those supports to Canadians who need them.
Cross them off the list, folks.
Responsible. This finance minister can't even drive responsibly, and they want us to believe that she's fiscally responsible.
Woo!
Uncomfortably close to broke, according to an MNP survey, with more than 50% of Canadians $200 away from insolvency. After 8 years of failed Liberal policies, they're just not worth the cost. There's young Canadians and fixed senior incomes living in their cars and under bridges in tents. That's the state of Canada after 8 years of their failed policies. Will this Prime Prime Minister balance the budget, get inflation and interest rates down so more Canadians don't have to live out on the streets.
That is how you get your point across.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, I've been a member of Parliament since 2015. From day one, that side has pursued an austerity agenda. Canada Child Benefit, they want to cut it. Supports for seniors, they've never been there. Supports for businesses during the pandemic and since, they've never been there. We brought down taxes for small businesses not once, but twice.
You shut down businesses.
Every single time, Mr. Speaker. We're helping cities with public transit, with other infrastructure. They are not there. They're not worth the risk, Mr. Speaker.
Look,
Oh, you can't make this up.
then I have Deputy the Foothills.
Well, ironically, the Liberals set aside $300 million to ACOA to deal with Fiona for farmers, but not a single dime has gone out the door. But all supported this legislation. Even the Greens understand how important farming is.
Wow. Even the stupid Green Party understands.
Rates and inflationary costs, and now not one but two carbon taxes. This Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost. The Prime Minister is fanning the flames of inflation with yet another carbon tax on Canadian farmers. Right. Why will this Prime Minister not respect the will of this House and axe his farm-killing carbon tax?
Guys, you can't make this up. This is hilarious. Oh, Pierre's barking. Pierre's barking. You can't. My camera's in the way.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my honourable
Big Bertha
is correct. Fiona did incredible damage, and I'm proud that as the minister responsible for ACOA, the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, we did receive $300 million. $100 million of that has gone to small craft harbours. There was $40 million that has gone to Parks Canada. We now have a program on the table that is offering funding to build climate centres. I think there's $9 million left in the fund. I'd be glad to give the honourable member details. I'll get back to him on that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
If I could just remind members, please, to restrict your comments to the time that you actually have the floor to ask either.
Oh, what are you going to do? Another 20-minute speech?
Question.
Thanks so much for making it to the end of the video. If you want to support the channel financially, you can do so by checking out the merch shop linked right up there. Or if you want to do something for free, which is also absolutely acceptable and highly encouraged, you can subscribe right there. If you want to continue watching videos like this, you can do so by clicking or tapping right there to watch the next upcoming video. And if you want to watch a little bit of different content, but also Canadian stuff, you can do so by clicking right up there. That's my second channel, House of Canada, also known as the House of Commons Highlights. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.